Good afternoon, all. We are continuing our discussion, and during last week's episode or channel, we talked about being in a buyer's market and the undesirability of being in a buyer's market, and the desirability of being, or obvious desirability of being in a seller's market, and um, the threats if you are in a buyer's market, especially in a very competitive environment. And yeah, so we want to continue with that theme. Um, and I was just thinking around at the moment and thinking that many entrepreneurs, perhaps even most, especially single, lifestyle entrepreneurs like coaches and photographers and people like that, um, live in permanently in buyers markets. And unless they establish a niche for themselves, they're going to do that for the rest of their lives. And you will know you're in a buyer's market because you will be in price competition almost inevitably. You will have a lot of browsers, a lot of tire kickers coming by to ask about your services. Um, and you will probably have the buyers bargaining a lot when it comes to the point of purchase. And it's not difficult to find out that you're in a buyer's market because almost everyone is there. And I often wonder to myself, why? Why on earth would you choose to position your business in such a difficult environment? Now, I'm going to talk a lot about individual sales because it's just easier to relate the stories
Hmm.
rather than business positioning. But the rules are identical. Whether you're a 200 person business turning over 100 million a year or 200 million a year, or you're a one off coach or photographer or something like that, the rules are pretty similar. So you find yourselves, especially at startup, you go around grabbing everything that is available to you. So you might be coaching a owner of a filling station or the franchisee of a filling station one day, and you might be coaching the director of an NGO involved in child welfare another day, um, simply because you have to make money and you grab whatever opportunities are around. And when times get tight, you do the same thing. You just grab whatever comes along your way. Very typically, you have to keep your prices pretty low because you are in heavy competition from a lot of other people. And the buyer's reasons for choosing you over others are often obscure. They may be they just like you. It may be that you were there at the right time, the right place. It may be that you said something which resonated with them. Or it may be that you did a solidly good job in presenting what you can do as opposed to what others can do, and you stuck out in front, like many businesses. So you will find, if you look around, there are many businesses which stick their heads up out of a very competitive crowd and become very successful businesses. You'll see that particularly in the area of, say, restaurants, where you'll go to one franchise restaurant and you have to stand outside for half an hour every evening to get a table. And you go to another restaurant in the same franchise chain, in the same sort of area, the same income bracket, and everyone, all of the waiters are standing around looking bored, and the tables are three quarters empty. Why? Why does one stick its head up and make this raving success of itself, and another that is selling the identical brand, the identical products, the identical prices is quiet? attracting no customers. Interesting thought. We can
Sure.
speculate why that should be. Might be that restaurant number one has been very clever in positioning itself right next door to a supermarket entrance. And restaurant two has been very unclever, positioning itself at the back end of a shopping center where all of the other businesses are closed in the evenings. Um, it might be simply the attitude of the staff, and that's often the point at which an arrangement changes, a buying decision changes. You walk in, you get surly staff, you get rushed out of your table as soon as you finished your food. They can't wait to present the bill to see what their tip is. Um, they are never available when you're looking for them. They're always gossiping in the corner, and nobody is so blind as someone trying to avoid your eye,
Yep.
as you and I commented just recently in a
Yes.
restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there may be a whole lot of other reasons, but probably the biggest reason is word of mouth. People
Mm.
go around and talking and saying, "Hey, that place is quite cool," and another place, yeah, I didn't get very good food there, or the staff were a bit rude, or the service is terrible, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the second restaurant has put itself at the bottom end of the food chain of the buyer's market. The first restaurant, there's a queue outside, so it's converted the exact same product at the exact same price with the exact same brand into becoming a seller's market where it is in demand, where buyers will queue to wait to get into it. That is the golden nugget. That is really where you want to be as an entrepreneur. And it doesn't matter if you're in engineering or mining or construction or any other business, the same kind of rules apply. Excellent service, great response, word of mouth, and all of the other things that go along with it are the things that you need to generate to build that business.
Um, there is to take your analogy and maybe shift it a bit and ask the question. You and I know about our local hangout, a
Yeah.
coffee shop around the corner,
Mm,
and the context of this is up until it had a shift or a change in ownership, it virtually closed down. Same location, all right, there's rebranding, different managers, thriving,
mm,
cars parked all over the place. And you can see it in peak times. You're walking, there's a buzz and all those kinds of things. How does the owner therefore make the difference, or a new owner make a difference, where it's seemingly once again the restaurant was trading in a buyer's market, and an owner comes in, makes all the difference, changes it into a seller's market? In terms of your analogy, what is that? Is would you therefore say is the new owner is basically looked at um, looking at great responsiveness, making sure that staff service levels are up there, and there are rave reviews. But when they started, it already seemed like they had clientele. I mean, I just noticed it because it's around the corner from us.
mm, mm. Yeah, that particular restaurant was sold twice within a short time and
Mm-hmm.
then essentially went insolvent the third time.
Mm.
And then now it's a raving success.
Yes.
And I think you've answered a lot of your own questions, Jacques. You know the owner. The owner has been to our table several times and had
Yes.
discussions with us and asked us what we thought about the food.
Mm,
And, um, when we were coming back and all the rest of the things. The previous times when we went there, the owner was never there. I never actually knew who owned the place.
correct.
Um, the staff were in a rush to get home. That's the one thing. So there's attitude that was there of the owner
Mm,
and the staff. But there's something deeper there. The successful owner has looked at the locale that they're in. It's a older suburb where most of the older people are moving out. There's a lot of townhouses, a lot of young people around there. Um, it's a little suburban restaurant. It's outside of a shopping center. Um, so you don't have to worry about people banging your cars and all that sort of thing. And it is a unique setting. There are nice gardens and all the rest of it. But the owners also looked at the market and said, what does the market want here? And they changed their menu to a lot more sort of lighter meal type things for lunchtime, for drinks evenings. They don't open for dinner excepting on the weekend, and for functions. They'd never intrude a function on the rest of the restaurant. So they'd rather forego a function than close the restaurant for that particular day, which the previous owner used to do routinely. And they have assessed their market, and you look at their clientele, they are younger, they're more successful, they are the people who want a particular style of food and drink, and the owners looked at it and catered for the marketplace. So
mm,
she's really understood what was there. She
mm,
knows that she can't compete with the franchised restaurants that are in a shopping center a couple of 100 meters away. And there's two of them in that shopping center, plus a whole lot of takeaways just around the corner from that. She's not trying to compete with the franchised outfit. She wants a totally different menu. She wants a totally different ambiance, different drinks, different style of wines that are served,
mm,
and it's working very, very well. So I think
mm,
the owner's done two things. Number one, she's understood the market and responded to the market. Number
mm,
two, she's got the staff attitude and her own attitude together, and they are customer responsive. They work with their customers. Many of the waiters and waitresses that were there were fun people to talk to. We
mm.
used to laugh, we still do. We laugh and joke with them.
Yep.
Couldn't imagine doing that with the previous lot. Couldn't imagine. I remember we had to once move from a table because they were mowing the grass right next to our table. This awfully noisy mower and edge trimmer was coming past right next to our table. No consideration for the diners.
None whatsoever. That's
Yeah. So,
absolutely true.
there's simple lessons here. A lot of people shoot themselves in the foot by simply not looking. What's the market? Who wants what?
Mm.
Um, and then giving them what they're wanting. And yeah, we've talked a lot about restaurants now. But what if you're in something sterile, like you sell nuts and bolts to business?
Yep.
Who cares about the owner's personality and the
Yes.
staff's friendliness, because you're dealing mainly in email and maybe sometimes on the telephone,
Exactly.
and you're buying nuts and bolts? Who cares
Mm.
about that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Well, once again, the rule is the same. Are you providing the service that the market wants? There's actually a nut and bolt supplier not far from my home. I think they must have been there for 20 years. Through all of the dramas that have happened, they sell fasteners, and they're very expert in fasteners. You can bring them in a part and they'll say, ah, yes. They might have to measure it a bit and say, ah, yes, I know what you need here. And go into the back room and come out with some specialized fastener that is just designed for the application you want. They understand their market needs. They've defined who will buy from them. They've got a small clientele who are mainly things like small repair shops and home DIY people. Um, and they've got a big orders section for industrial buyers. And they stock exactly what people need. And I've never known them to say, I'll order it for you. Somehow they've got the magic that they know what you want before you order it. They also are wonderfully friendly people. And they've been going, I think it's a father and son that have run that business over many, many, many years. So even in something as prosaic as nuts and bolts, you can make a difference by understanding your market, responding to the needs of your market, and the attitude of your staff. Now, this all sounds trite. How does that change you into a seller's market? Well, maybe it doesn't entirely, but it sure helps. It takes you out of the bottom end. You don't want to be a bottom feeder in a buyer's market because that's where things are going to go badly wrong. So if you find yourself with few customers, um, then do something different because the people aren't buying what you are selling.
Ed, with the restaurant example, with just one restaurant doing exactly the same thing as the other, except the one is differentiated in terms of their success. I'm just thinking about my own industry, and it's quite interesting that you started off by talking about coaches.
Mm,
And mentors for that sake, for that matter,
mm,
is and I'm talking specifically if I use my own experience from what my practice was like pre COVID, March 2020, and what had transpired during COVID. It was quite interesting. But just talking generally, so I experienced the pinch, the pain, immediately. My pipeline just emptied like crazy because of my mix of customers. So
mm,
that's just the background. So my customers, and it's interesting, my customers experience so the mix immediately, or the impact of the pandemic immediately and therefore impacted on me, and my ability to pivot as everybody was talking was very slow, and therefore I had to go into a massive rebuilding phase. 2020 was awful, and revenues just shrunk by nearly 70%. 2021 a lot better, where revenues in 2020 then doubled, more different types of clients, etc. Interestingly enough, but what I did notice with two classes of coaching practices was the one, because of the pandemic, these coaches were extremely busy and demand, and just couldn't believe their good fortune, while the others, in terms of where I was sitting, was really battling to adjust. And yeah, it's basically offering similar type services, having and by the very nature of what you do as a coach is that you got to have great interpersonal skills,
mm.
and so forth. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, with just that detail, is how would you describe the difference here? Is it the same of what you've been talking about up until this moment, in terms of there's a core reason for driving an experience within a seller's market? So if and I'm just using the opportunity to glean as much as possible from you as a coach, what would you say was the difference? I'm class B, experienced great difficulty. Class A experienced a boom even during a pandemic. What do you think was the very specific difference?
Yeah, exactly the same thing happened to public speakers, facilitators, and mentors, and happened to me as well. And I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to taking my own advice, like so many of us. So I was very, very slow to react. But things started to change later on. But
Yes.
um, the reality there, I believe, Jacques, in those ones, and we've only got a few seconds there, a few minutes left, but I
Mm.
believe that the reality in those ones has a lot to do with your brand value. So we talked about the restaurant industry, and in the end result, I suppose the composite of all of those things, so the brand of the restaurant, that's what people see of the restaurant. I think it
Mm.
is even more so in the case of a coach, a mentor, a public speaker, a trainer, a facilitator. The brand value is understood and often very widely distributed. Because what happened during COVID is a whole lot of coaches and mentors and speakers and trainers and facilitators realized early on that their traditional bu- business of going to their customers or their clients and their clients coming to them was not going to happen in the near future. And so they converted to electronic coaching and teaching and etc. very early on. And then they used the power of the internet hugely effectively to develop a particular niche, a particular brand, a particular awareness. Um, and because it was the internet, that awareness was no longer local. That awareness was international.
Mm.
So there are a lot of public speakers right now who, well, I suppose they would stand on a stage again if you really bribed them. But man, the bribe would have to be very big because they're making so much money sitting in their studio at their home at any hour of the day, um, uh, doing all of this on Zoom and making megabucks out of it. And where before they would have thought that an audience of 2,000 people was wonderful, really exciting. Now they're talking to 10,000 people quite frequently or more.
Mm.
There have been conventions of 100,000 people. You could not have done that in the pre COVID days. And the people who used the internet wisely and delivered their service over the internet and also their brand over the internet and their word of mouth over the internet were very, very, many were very, very successful indeed. And yeah, some of them COVID absolutely made the difference in the world to them, made them millionaires. They benefited hugely from the fact that we had this pandemic. It was amazing. Um, it's one of the industries where the people who moved smartly and quickly and judiciously got themselves into that and now almost unassailable position because now everybody else is trying to emulate them, but you're now, oh, okay. So you're something like a whatever coach, speaker, famous speaker, or whatever. But you aren't them. You aren't the original. You didn't have first mover advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So also be aware of your brand, and we can get into a whole lot of discussion about brand. But just very briefly, my view of branding is you don't own your brand. Your clients and prospective clients own your brand. It is their view of you, not what you say of yourself, that actually determines your brand. Your brand identity might be yours, your colors, your logo, the style of your presentation, your fonts, and all the other sort of. standard stuff. That you own. But the image that the world has of you, you can tell them what image they should have of you, but the world's become a very cynical place. So they'll look at it once and then they'll develop their own view. And because the internet is such short attention span, if they look at it once and they find that don't measure up to your brand values, you will never ever see them again. They have too much choice. They might be competing with coaches from Venezuela and China and Indonesia and Finland and Canada and wherever, from your desk in Boxburg. So you have one bite at the cherry, and if you don't succeed in getting it that one, you're not going to get them again. The
Yeah.
plus side is that there's an awful lot of cherries out there.
Yes, I must tell you, as I was beginning to think, okay, so still using myself as reference, so didn't react fast enough. Now I'm a straggler, I'm a late adopter. Is
Mm,
there still opportunity
of course,
for me as a late adopter?
of course. You may not become the rock star of coaches worldwide, um, but that's probably not what you want to do. You want to do decent coaching and make a lot of money out of it. Um, and there are a lot of people who need coaching. So once again, if you find your niche in life and you um, find who you can look after best, um, then and you have a good reputation in that area, you can carve a perfect niche for yourself right now. A lot of people are doing this today. Again, in the speaking space that I speak of, and I know in the mentoring space, where people have developed specific strengths and specific abilities in specific industries, and they're doing very well at it. They are. Um, there's enough business, even in tiny niches. If you look at a coach, how many clients do you actually need in your lifetime? 1,000? Probably not even.
Good. That's a good point. It's the quality of the client, not the quantity, that
Absolutely.
matters.
There are a couple of billion people worldwide. There's probably a billion businesses of all types worldwide. You need maybe a 500 or 1,000 of those. That's a very tiny slice of, there's lots of cherries out there. It's a
Yeah.
very tiny slice. What you got to find it is identify it, know why you are the best in that particular area, and then go out and tell all of those people in that area very effectively and in very short sentences why you are the best in that particular area. Not rocket science. It's been done for decades, probably hundreds of years. If we go back to some very old, early industries, um, they operated on that basis many, many years ago, perhaps even thousands of years ago. One of the one of my trainers gave the comparison of the industry of prostitution and how it had evolved and targeted markets through the centuries and millennia. It was a very interesting comparison. I am not advocating prostitution. I'm just citing the fact that these aren't new ideas. They've been around for a very, very long time.
Yes, but I mean that's a business and one of the oldest industries in the world, if you like,
Yeah,
and so they also have marketing strategies,
absolutely.
and you
And
might find them distasteful, but
yeah,
look at the outline of what it is that they do. If you just examine it, you can kind of go, oh, I recognize some of
mm,
the key principles to effective marketing strategies here,
yeah,
and
target
how.
marketing. I
Yes.
market
Yes.
segmentation, pricing, all of those things you can recognize going back thousands of years to Greek
Oh,
and Egyptian times.
absolutely. So Ed, we've really come to the end of our half an hour, but
Mm.
I think, we certainly warming up to our topic, and we continue with this topic because there's so many different avenues to examine
Yes,
in
there
all
are.
of this.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
for those who listen to our replays, we are going to continue with this conversation. Join us live, and we appreciate you listening. And in future, if you have any comments and questions, please, we want to make it more participative as we go along. So, and once again, Ed, thank you for sharing. And I benefited personally, and hopefully, somebody who's listening to this, I benefited from what Ed was saying. But if you have any sort of, if you identify with where I find myself, or even Ed, if you're listening to the nuggets that Ed shared, understand them, change something, experiment if you must, but see the nuggets in action and change your world for the better. Change your business for the better. Thank you, everyone.